The Talmud isn't easy for many reasons. First of all, we are accustomed to having everything laid out before us. Every drop of the thought has to be put into another sentence, and we put it into sentences and paragraphs, and it's all nicely structured so that you can go through it and it follows as a JLI textbook is today, right? You have the JLI textbook. The Talmud is pre-JLI. So the Talmud has a whole different system, and most of this was originally oral. The Mishnah was given to us orally because it's part of the oral law. In order to have effective teaching, it had to be concise. So the Mishnah says, teach them brevity, so that a student went away with a couple of lines and could use that as the foundation to remember everything else that was explained in the lecture. Because the objective is to walk away and to know it. When they committed it to memory, you know how they did it? They repeated it 100 times. So when it says the Mishnah, at the bottom of page 3, those few lines of the Mishnah, a student would study 100 times in order to commit it to memory. And some would do it even more. So the orders of the Mishnah, our sages, the sages of the Talmudic time already, knew it like that. They could sit in a moment and go through all of the 6 orders of the Mishnah. Zoom. RAM memory. That's where they had it. And we see rabbis, scholars of previous generations that could do that with the entire Talmud. All the volumes of the Talmud, they could go in one instant, go through it, and you say, I'm looking for such and such and such. Yep, it's there. And that's where it was. Because they worked from their youth on acquiring it in memory. Now, what happens, of course, is when it's very brief, you've got to start analyzing it in order to extract what it says. And without precise analysis, you lose 90% of what's there. So the Mishnah is the precision law, and the Talmud is how the rabbis discussed it to show all of the complexity that's in the Mishnah. That's what we're trying to do. So we're looking at it from our modern times, and we're looking at these brief few words. I mean, is the word this way, worded that way, the letter, the word before this, before... What are you doing? What kind of analysis is this? No, that's what it was meant to be. You couldn't do it to any modern writing, but you can do it to the Mishnah writing because that's the way it was intended to be. So the Mishnah is, put it in perspective, Moses came down from the mountain and he said, I got for you a Torah with 613 commandments. And one of the commandments is you should put on tefillin. And it says it in the Torah. You should bind a sign on your arm and a frontlet between your eyes. And do it every morning. Okay, so what's a sign? I don't know. A potato? What are you supposed to do there with a sign? It doesn't say what. So Moses came down and said, gentlemen, listen up, put a sign on your arm. You got to assume there was one guy that raised his hand and said, what's a sign? And you've got to assume that Moses had an answer. Well, the truth of the matter is, what was Moses doing on the mountain for 40 days? Moses was a pretty bright guy. A Rhodes Scholar, no less. And he had a good teacher. God himself. How long does it take to get through the first 5 books of Moses? He didn't even have the 5 books, he only had the first 2. 1.5 actually. How long did it take you to get through the 1.5 books? He did nothing else. He said, I didn't eat, I didn't drink, he didn't sleep. So 24 hours, 40 days, that's all he could get through was Breshit and part of Exodus. The answer was that Moses also had the same questions of God. God said the mitzvah of tefillin. So Moses said, and what is it? It's a sign. What's a sign? And God told him, this is what it means. This is the sign. And you want to know how you can derive it from the Torah? I'll show you how you do that too. If you look at the word this way and look at the word that way, you'll realize what it is. So when Moses came down and told the Jewish people, he said, gentlemen, this is what it is. You had the question. What is it? This is what it is. And that's the way he spent 40 years in the desert of Moses teaching the Jewish people the oral law. And the oral law simply means the practical application of the 613 commandments. How you observe each one of them. The Talmud, the Mishnah first, wrote down all of those laws. Why did they write it? It's oral law. Why was it written? Because people were not able to maintain all of it in their minds. Rabbi Judah, the prince, was concerned at that time that people were forgetting. And although people had their own personal notes, there was no authoritative record. So he took the bold step of establishing an authoritative record of the oral law. That's what the Mishnah was. And so for 500 years, that's what they were engaged in. They reviewed the Mishnah, they studied the Mishnah, and memorized the Mishnah. But then things became tough when they get disputes about what exactly did it mean, which rabbi said what, how did we interpret this, how did we actually get to this? And then for another 500 years, the rabbis were explaining the Mishnah. 250 years. The rabbis were explaining the Mishnah to their students in their academies. At the end of those 250 years, they wrote it down. They reviewed it over a number of years and wrote down an authoritative record of the interpretation of the Mishnah. That's what we call the Gemara or the Talmud. And that's what we have till this day. Now we have commentaries on top of commentaries on top of commentaries that have gone on throughout the ages. But that's what we're studying now. We're studying those records that were put down at that time.
If you like that video, hit the subscribe button and notification bell below for hours of the best Jewish content online.